They didn't see him. Not really. They saw a mop, a name tag, rubber soles that didn't squeak, and like most people trained by silence, they looked right through him, never once wondering who he might have been before the bucket, or what he was really there to clean up. But he saw them. Every forced smile, every stiffened back when a certain pair of heels clicked past, the way people stopped laughing mid-sentence, like joy itself needed permission to exist. And in those quiet corners, he gathered something more valuable than numbers gathered: truth. Not the kind printed on quarterly reports. The kind whispered between coffee breaks, behind locked office doors, when no one thinks anyone's listening. And he was listening, because sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one everyone thinks doesn't belong there. Now, let's get started. The sun hadn't yet broken over the snow-capped peaks surrounding Denver when Malcolm Hart pulled his weathered truck into a quiet lot on Spear Boulevard. Summit Ridge Auto House looked like a boutique museum, glass walls glinting with early light, rows of polished imports gleaming beneath showroom chandeliers, and an entryway manicured like a five-star hotel lobby. From the outside, it whispered luxury. From the inside, he knew, it whispered control. He killed the engine and sat for a moment, his breath fogging the windshield. The truck's engine clicked as it cooled, and Malcolm stared through the glass at a place that used to shut its doors in his face. That was 20 years ago when he first applied to work sales here. They never called him back. Now he owned it. 3 weeks earlier, Malcolm had quietly acquired Summit Ridge Auto House through an LLC linked to his holding company. No fanfare, no press release. He didn't want congratulations. He wanted the truth, unfiltered, unvarnished, unseen. And the only way to get that kind of truth was to disappear into the background. He reached for the janitor's uniform folded neatly in the passenger seat. Navy blue shirt, name stitched simply Mac. He slipped it on like armor, grabbed the mop bucket, and stepped out into the cold. Inside, employees were already starting their routines. A few nodded at him out of politeness, but their eyes slid past him just as quickly. To them, he was just another name they wouldn't remember. And that's exactly what he needed to be. By 8:00 a.m., the dealership had settled into its morning rhythm. Phones rang. Salespeople laughed a little too loudly. Someone wheeled in complimentary coffee. Malcolm moved across the high-gloss tile with deliberate ease, mopping the corners that no one ever looked at, listening more than cleaning. At 8:12, the air shifted. Heels. Fast. Measured. Expensive. Victoria Slate. General manager. High control. High heels. High stakes. She walked like someone who never expected to be questioned. Her white blouse was starched to perfection, navy pants razor-creased, lips red, and her tone sharper than either. She spotted him instantly. "Excuse me," she snapped, stopping within 5 feet of him. "Who cleared maintenance to be on the showroom floor during business hours?" Her voice cut across the room, sharp enough to make a receptionist flinch. 2 customers glanced up. Malcolm didn't look at her. He kept mopping. "Just trying to get the floors clean before it gets too busy, ma'am." "Try harder," she said louder. "You're streaking dirty water across 6-figure vehicles. That bucket looks like you've been rinsing coffee grounds." Malcolm stopped, turned to her. Calm, even. "Fresh mop head. Clean water." Victoria scoffed, shook her head. "This is not a truck stop restroom. Keep it moving, and stay out of sight." He nodded once, turned silently, and continued toward the hallway. No one said a word. A young sales associate, maybe mid-20s. Name tag said. Ethan looked like he wanted to say something. He didn't. He looked down and pretended to type. Malcolm didn't blame him. People don't risk their jobs for the janitor. But it wasn't about the mop. Not really. It was about the reminder. Power speaks loudest when it needs to prove it's still there. Victoria's voice had done what she intended, reminded the room who was allowed to be seen and who wasn't. Malcolm took that moment in, not with anger, with precision. He wasn't there to fight her, not yet. He was there to watch, to listen. And Victoria Slate had just introduced herself more clearly than any resume ever could. By the third day, Malcolm knew the rhythm of the place better than its managers did. Summit Ridge Auto House didn't run on engines or incentives. It ran on fear, controlled silence, eye contact that never lasted too long, smiles that didn't reach the eyes. He saw in the way the receptionist, Jenna, stopped laughing mid-joke whenever Victoria walked by. He saw it when the lead technician, Terry, folded his clipboard the moment she entered the service bay like she might read his notes and twist them into failure. There was no music in the break room, no real conversations, just short exhales between tasks. People here didn't breathe. They braced. And Victoria Slate? She moved through it like a conductor of a silent orchestra, each staff member a string pulled taut, waiting for her approval or wrath. Malcolm cleaned the same floors every morning, same mop, same path. But what he was really collecting was data, postures, glances, the tiny pauses in conversation when certain names were spoken. He noticed that the only people who dared smile at him were those who didn't have to answer directly to Victoria, and even they did it with caution, like friendliness itself was a liability. He watched as Victoria made a junior saleswoman cry behind a closed office door. She emerged 15 minutes later, wiping mascara and nodding like it was her fault. No one asked her if she was okay. They just handed her tissues and looked away. Late that afternoon, Malcolm was wiping down the base of a display case when he heard a commotion up front. A child, maybe 5 years old, had spilled his apple juice near the reception. The mother crouched down, frantically looking for napkins. Before she could find any, Malcolm was already there, towel in hand, kneeling without a word. The father gave him a small smile. "Thanks, man. Appreciate it." "No problem," Malcolm replied, voice quiet. He was finishing up when Victoria emerged from the hallway. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," she barked. Her tone didn't just change the room, it froze it. "You're on your knees in the middle of the showroom? In front of customers?" The family looked confused. The mother started to say something, but Victoria held up her hand. "I'm sorry, folks. This is unacceptable. It won't happen again." "He was just helping," the mother offered. But Victoria wasn't listening. "We are a luxury dealership, not a daycare center. This isn't a truck stop. Get off the floor." Malcolm stood slowly, calm, towel still in hand. He didn't flinch, he didn't respond, and that scared her more than anger ever could. "You done?" he asked softly. Victoria blinked. The tone startled her. Not defiant, not aggressive, just steady. "I'm here to work. That's what I'm doing. Cleaning messes, keeping the floor safe. That's all I've done." She shook her head. "Then do it in the back, where no one sees you." She turned and walked off, her heels clicking like punctuation. Behind her, the silence remained. A few people glanced at Malcolm. Some nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly. He went back to his cart, continued cleaning. But now, the silence was no longer compliant. It was a curiosity. The break room later that day held 3 people and 30 whispers. Jenna, the receptionist, sat beside Ethan, the young salesman. Across from them was Hector Ruiz, the lead tech, late 40s, oil-stained hands, eyes that missed nothing. "You see the way she went off on him?" Jenna asked. Ethan nodded slowly. "Twice now." Hector peeled the foil off his sandwich and muttered, "She didn't like the way he stood." "What do you mean?" Jenna asked. "Didn't flinch, didn't fold. People like her don't like that." Ethan leaned back. "He's not like most janitors." "No," Hector said. "He isn't." There was a pause. "You think he's corporate?" Jenna whispered. Hector didn't answer right away, just chewed, then finally said, "I think we're being watched for the first time, and not by her." Malcolm overheard bits of that conversation. Not all of it, just enough. He was by the utility sink, refilling a spray bottle, when he caught the thread. He didn't smile, didn't nod, just stood there, breathing in the moment. They were starting to see it. Not the truth, not yet, but the shadow of it. He wiped his hands and looked at himself in the scratched mirror above the sink. The man staring back wore cheap rubber soles and a uniform that didn't belong to him. But the eyes? The eyes knew exactly why he was there. That evening, Malcolm jotted something down in his small notebook. They work through fear. He underlined it twice. By the end of that week, he had counted 6 instances where Victoria undermined her staff publicly. One technician she chastised for speaking too loudly. A finance clerk she snapped at asked about a policy change. And in every case, the response was the same. Heads down, voices lower, no eye contact. Even the assistant manager, Greg Tullia, man with decades of experience, moved around her like she was radioactive. Malcolm approached him once near the copy machine. "You've been here a while?" Greg didn't look up. 8 years. Feels like you run things." Greg gave a tired smile. "Not really. But they all come to you when something breaks." Greg paused. "Why do you ask?" Malcolm wiped down a ledge beside him. "Just observing." Greg finally looked up, met his eyes. "You don't talk like a janitor." Malcolm shrugged. "Maybe I'm just someone who wants to see how people behave when they think no one's watching." Greg stared at him a long second, then nodded, once, slow. And for the first time since Malcolm had walked through those glass doors, someone didn't look away. Monday morning arrived with the kind of electric stillness Denver gets before snow. Victoria's slate was in rare form. Quarterly numbers had come in, and they were good, better than projected. Summit Ridge Auto House had posted the highest December pre-orders in the region. She walked into the showroom wearing a fitted charcoal blazer and a red silk blouse, heels clicking like exclamation points. She smiled. That alone made people nervous. Around 9:45 a.m., she received a call from upstairs. Corporate. Someone from Ellis Automotive Holdings, the parent company that had quietly acquired Summit Ridge, was stopping by for a visit. A surprise drop-in, they said. Exactly the kind of opportunity Victoria loved. Show the numbers, show the polish, show that under her command, the dealership ran like a luxury Swiss watch. She freshened her lipstick, pulled her staff into line, and made sure every coffee cup, every window corner, every fingerprint on the glass doors vanished. Jenna was instructed to smile wider. Ethan was told to stand straighter. Everyone was told what to say and how to say it. At exactly 10:00 a.m., a black town car pulled into the lot. Victoria stood by the front entrance, waiting like a hostess at a private club. The back door of the car opened, and a man stepped out, middle-aged, tall, wearing a tailored gray overcoat and Italian leather shoes. On his wrist gleamed a gold watch. She exhaled slightly. This must be the guy. Then the other back door opened, and Malcolm Hart stepped out. No mop, no cart, no uniform. Just a deep navy suit, white shirt, no tie. Calm eyes that scanned the dealership like he'd never left. Victoria's smile faltered. For half a second, her brain tried to make it fit. Maybe he was someone's assistant? Maybe he was returning something. But then the first man turned to the staff gathered in the lobby and said, "Good morning, everyone. I'd like to formally introduce Mr. Malcolm Hart, principal owner of Ellis Automotive Holdings. Effective 3 weeks ago, he is now the majority owner of Summit Ridge Auto House." The room went silent. The kind of silence that doesn't just hush mouth, sit stills heartbeats. Someone in finance dropped a pen. Ethan started with wide eyes. Jenna's jaw slightly parted. Victoria blinked. "Excuse me?" Malcolm stepped forward. "You heard him." Her voice cracked, barely. "You're... what?" He tilted his head slightly. "The janitor. That was me. For a few days." He let the weight of that truth hang, unhurried. Just wanted to see how things really ran, when no one thought they were being watched. Her face flushed. "You can't just pretend to be someone else." "Actually, I can," he said. "And I did. The LLC that purchased this location belongs to my holding group. The ink was dry 3 weeks ago." She opened her mouth, closed it again. Around them, the staff stood still as storefront mannequins, every eye on her, every breath held. "Why?" she asked finally. Malcolm glanced around the showroom, then back at her. "To see who I was trusting my business with. To see how people were treated when the titles were off and no one was looking. He took one step closer, voice even, and what I saw was enough. Victoria crossed her arms, trying to find solid ground. You're judging me based on a few days? He didn't blink. You judged me in 30 seconds. The silence cracked open, deep and wide. Malcolm turned to the gathered staff. I'll be holding an all-hands meeting at 11 a.m. I want every department there. Sales, finance, service, even the night cleaners. Full attendance. Victoria's voice had softened. Am I included in that? Malcolm looked at her evenly. You'll be addressed then. He walked past her, heading toward the conference room. A path opened as he moved. No one stopped him. No one dared. And in that moment, Victoria Slate became something she had never been inside these walls. Exposed. At 11:05, every staff member was seated or standing in the main conference room. Technicians leaned against back walls in oil-stained uniforms. Sales reps sat stiffly in ergonomic chairs. Jenna twisted her ring. Ethan rubbed his hands together. Even Greg Tully sat up straight for the first time in years. Malcolm stood at the front. No slides, no microphone, just presence. Thank you all for being here, he began. I know this wasn't on your calendar. He looked around slowly. People met his eyes, carefully, curiously. My name is Malcolm Hart, and while some of you may have known that name, most of you didn't. That's okay. What matters is this. I now own Summit Ridge Auto House. A beat. And I didn't come here to tear things down or deliver speeches. I came to listen. He paused, hands clasped in front of him. So I did. I mopped floors, cleaned windows, emptied trash, listened to what people say when they think no one's listening. A few glances traded around the room. What I heard told me a lot about this place, about who feels safe, about who carries the weight, and about how silence has become a language around here. He turned slightly, eyes landing briefly on Victoria, standing near the door, arms crossed. I saw employees walk on eggshells, not out of pressure to perform, but out of fear of humiliation, of being called out, shut down, dismissed. He paused. That's not how you build trust. That's how you bleed it dry. Someone near the back let out a breath, a soft exhale. I'm not here to play savior, Malcolm continued, but I will be making changes. Eyes widened, the tension shifted, the room leaned in. He looked at Victoria again. Ms. Slate. She looked up, spine stiff. You've been running this dealership for 5 years. I've reviewed the numbers. I don't dispute the profits. He paused. But profit without people is nothing. And leadership that relies on fear isn't leadership, it's insecurity with a corner office. The silence swelled. You've humiliated staff members. More than once, I know. I was one of them. And if that's how you treat someone you think can't fight back, I have to ask how many others you've silenced along the way. Victoria's eyes flashed. I've done what I thought was best. I'm not debating, Malcolm said calmly. I'm informed. Your approach doesn't align with what this dealership stands for anymore. I'll be reviewing all leadership positions, including yours, over the next 2 weeks. She didn't speak again. Malcolm turned back to the room. This place is about to change, starting with how we communicate, how we support each other, how we lead. He scanned the room. If you've got ideas, questions, frustrations, I want to hear them, directly, not filtered. I'll be spending time with each department over the coming weeks. He nodded once. Meetings done. People didn't rush out. They moved slowly, carefully, quietly. But something in their posture had changed. Victoria didn't move. She stood, rooted, staring ahead, her world suddenly without anchor. Malcolm didn't look back at her. He didn't need to. She knew. For the first time in her career, she was truly being seen. And it terrified her. The next morning, Summit Ridge Auto House felt different. Not louder, not freer, just quieter in a new way. People moved through the hallways with less stiffness, as if the pressure valve had been turned slightly. There were no celebrations, no visible changes to the walls or uniforms, but underneath the surface, something had shifted. Respect had started whispering back into the room. At 7:30 a.m., Malcolm was already upstairs in the ownership office, a space that had been unused for months. No plaque, no personal decorations, just a desk, a window, and a soft chair he never sat in. He preferred standing. Victoria Slate arrived at 9:00 sharp. Her blazer was pressed. Her expression is unreadable. She knocked once, then stepped inside. "You wanted to see me." Malcolm motioned to the seat across from him. "This isn't a courtroom. You can breathe." She sat, carefully, hands folded tight in her lap. "I suppose," she said dryly, "you want my resignation." He shook his head. "No, I want the truth." That stopped her. "I want to know how things got this way, how you convinced yourself that fear would lead to excellence." Victoria hesitated, then leaned back slightly. Her voice softened, almost unsure. "When I got here, it was chaotic. No structure, no order. Sales were flat. Morale was loose. People were too casual. So I brought discipline, focus, and it worked. We climbed the charts, hit every quota." "But at what cost?" Malcolm asked. She didn't answer right away. "You turned leadership into performance," he continued. "Control into a strategy. Shame into a tool. That's not leadership, Victoria. That's a defense mechanism." "I was trying to keep things tight," she said, the edge creeping back into her voice. "People listen when you're firm." He leaned in slightly. "They obey when they're afraid. They listen when they're respected." Victoria's eyes flicked away. "You're not incompetent," Malcolm added. "You're smart. You know how to move numbers. But what you lack is emotional discipline. That matters more than metrics." She looked down at her hands. "So what happens now?" "You're being placed on leave," he said simply. "Effective immediately. Paid? For now. HR will schedule your exit review." She didn't argue, didn't cry, just nodded slowly. "I'll consider reapplication," Malcolm continued. "In 6 months. Elsewhere. Not here." She stood. He stood with her, extended his hand. She looked at it, hesitated, then shook it without a word. On her way out, she passed Greg Tully, waiting just outside. He gave her a firm look, not pity, not smugness, just quiet finality. Then he stepped inside. Malcolm nodded toward the chair. Greg sat. "I watched how you handled things this week," Malcolm said. "You clean up quietly. Fix what's broken. Keep the place from falling apart behind the curtain." Greg didn't speak at first. "You've got leadership in you," Malcolm continued. "Quiet leadership. The kind that doesn't announce itself but holds everything together." Greg looked down, then up. "You're not like the others." "That's the point," Malcolm replied. For the next 20 minutes, they spoke plainly about systems, people, what needed to change. Malcolm didn't dictate. He listened. And by the end, he offered Greg the role of interim general manager with a trial period to prove whether he could rebuild what Victoria had controlled. Greg nodded, stunned. "I won't waste it." "I know," Malcolm said. Downstairs, word traveled faster than any official memo. By lunch, most of the staff knew Victoria was out, but no one popped champagne. It wasn't that kind of place yet. What they felt was quieter, a breath they hadn't taken in years. In the service bay, 2 techs bumped fists behind a lifted chassis. In the finance office, Jenna smiled just a little longer than usual. Even Ethan cracked a joke near the break room vending machine. But Malcolm wasn't here for comfort. Not yet. He spent the next 10 days doing what most owners never do, walking the halls without a title. He sat on overturned paint buckets beside mechanics eating cold burritos. He stood behind receptionists as they fielded angry customer calls. He asked the guy who washed loaner vehicles how often he was given new gloves. He didn't correct anyone. He didn't perform with authority. He just listened. And slowly, the walls began to come down. In the second week, he met with each department, not in conference rooms, but in their spaces. No cold AC, No projectors, just rolled-up sleeves and questions like, what makes your job harder than it needs to be? What do you wish leadership understood? What are we getting wrong? Sometimes people didn't answer. So he waited. And when they finally did, it was never about raises or perks. It was about being seen, being respected, being allowed to matter without having to fear someone like Victoria Slate walking by. On the 14th day, as snow began to fall gently across the front lot, Greg entered Malcolm's office with a notepad full of small fixes policy tweaks, staffing issues, scheduling adjustments. You sure you want to be this involved? He asked. Malcolm smiled. I'm not fixing the whole world, just this corner of it. Greg nodded, then paused. What made you come back? He asked. After they turned you away all those years ago? Malcolm leaned back, looked out the frosted window. Because dignity doesn't knock. It returns. 2 weeks later, from the outside, Summit Ridge Auto House looked the same. Same polished glass, same logo above the door, same rows of sedans gleaming like trophies under halogen light. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, but it was real. The receptionist no longer lowered her voice when she laughed. The techs in the service bay started calling each other by name, again real names, not nicknames barked across the floor. And for the first time in months, the espresso machine in the break room wasn't used just for cafe night, became an excuse to linger, to talk. No one called it a change. No one dared speak the word out loud. But everyone felt it. Malcolm had made it clear from day one. This wasn't about being liked. It was about being listened to. And respect? That wasn't something you handed out like bonuses. It was grown, slowly, in the pauses between decisions. He'd started meeting people on their own turf again. No memos, no performance reviews, just check-ins that felt more like conversations than audits. Sometimes he didn't even bring a notebook, just showed up, leaned against a wall, and asked, "What's working?" And just as often, "What's not?" The answers weren't always easy. We've never had an HR rep who actually shows up. The backlot floods every time it rains. We're still using scheduling software from 2009. Malcolm didn't fix everything overnight. He didn't promise to. But he looked them in the eye. He thanked them. And most importantly, he remembered what they said. That alone changed things. On the final Friday of the month, Greg organized something small, a cookout behind the building, just near the service bay. It wasn't fancy. Just burgers, some folding tables, and a speaker playing 90s soul. But people came. Almost everyone. Finance sat next to technicians. Sales staff brought their dogs. Jenna made cupcakes and didn't apologize for them being store-bought. One of the porters brought his wife. Hector Ruiz grilled like he'd been waiting for this excuse for years. Malcolm arrived late, wearing jeans and a fleece jacket. No suit, no clipboard. He stepped onto a small stack of pallets, hands in pockets, and looked around. No mic, no speech written out. Just him, them, and the smell of charcoal in the air. "All right," he said, raising his voice just enough. "Before Hector burns the last few burgers, I just want to say a few things." People turned toward him, plates in hand, drinks half finished. "I bought this dealership not because I wanted a bigger portfolio," he said. "I bought it because I believe places like this matter." He paused, not because of the cars, but because of the people. A few heads nodded. People who show up early, stay late, solve problems, take the heat from customers who don't care what kind of day you've had. People who hold this whole thing together with spit, tape, and pride. He looked out at them. And that kind of place only works if it's built on respect, not fear, not shame, just respect. Silence settled, not awkward, but whole. "That goes both ways," he added, "from top to bottom, from the boardroom to the guy washing windshields." He smiled gently. "I'm not perfect. I'll miss things, but I won't stop listening." Someone clapped, then another. Not thunderous applause, just honest, steady acknowledgement. Malcolm nodded and stepped down. The cookout continued, softer now, realer. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low behind the mountains and most of the staff had trickled out, Malcolm lingered in the service bay, alone. The air was cooler, the grill had gone cold. And there, in the corner, was the old mop bucket. Same one, same scuffed handle, same silent witness to what the place used to be. He walked over to it, didn't touch it, just looked at it for a long moment. That bucket had once been his disguise. Now it was a monument. Not to him, to what he saw when he pushed it, what he heard in its silence, what he remembered in every flinch, every downcast glance, every sigh held behind a locked jaw. He turned away and walked toward the back door, slowly, without ceremony, because this story was never about power reclaimed. It was about dignity restored. And the truth? The most powerful room in any building is the one where people finally feel safe enough to speak. And maybe that's the quiet revolution we forget to notice when someone chooses respect over revenge, when dignity walks in without raising its voice. Because sometimes the strongest change doesn't start with a speech. It starts with someone finally listening. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear how it made you feel. And if you believe stories like this matter, consider subscribing for more voices that remind us what humanity looks like at its best. Stay tuned.